Hi, this is Robin Morselli. You may remember me as a stand-in and a Bajoran Ops and also Bajoran civilian on about 120 episodes of Deep Space Nine and on a couple other shows. You're listening to Trek Untold.
Hello and welcome to Trek Untold, the Star Trek podcast that goes beyond the stars. I'm your host, Matthew Kaplowitz. In order to make a scene in a TV show or a film feel real, it has to be alive. That usually means a setting with some energy to it, and oftentimes that includes the use of background extras. These performers add ambience to the scene and make it feel like it's actually taking place somewhere that you and I would just be walking around in. Now, you might remember the 10th episode of this podcast series way back when we interviewed Tracy Lee Coco, who you would have seen throughout the entirety of Star Trek The Next Generation. She had a very unique perspective on the series, being essentially a series regular who you always saw but never heard from. On this week's episode, we meet the Deep Space Nine equivalent of this type of character with our guest, Robin Morselli. If you've ever watched Deep Space Nine, look up Robin's name, and I promise you will immediately recognize her face as a Bajoran officer on board the space station, who you've seen countless times. Robin appeared throughout all 7 seasons of DS9, and also popped up a few times in a few other Trek shows that were filming in that era. Now, don't just discount her because she was in the background. If you're trusted enough to be appearing in over 100 episodes in the same exact role, you're clearly doing something right. And Robin was witness to many important moments and all sorts of behind-the-scenes things that most people wouldn't even ever have known about. And through her time being a regular background character in the show, she was able to build personal relationships with all of the primary cast, and she's got a lot of great stories about that. What I found most interesting about Robin is the fact that her Hollywood career is very much a mystery, much like really her entire life story. A lot of the information about her is not public knowledge, and that's because for the most part, a lot of folks just haven't pursued it. But of course, this is Trek Untold, and we like to take deep dives on all sorts of people who contributed to the Star Trek universe, and that's why Robin is such a perfect guest for this show. So today, we're accessing the personal logs and memories of a performer who you've always seen, but never knew anything about until today. But before we jump into our interview, I want to ask you, are you following Trek Untold on social media? It's the best way to keep up to date on who's going to be the next guest on Trek Untold and to learn all about the other cool things that are happening here. So if you're on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, go ahead and look up Trek Untold, all one word, and give us a follow and a like. If you'd like to help support the show monetarily, go ahead and check out teespring.com/stores/trekuntold to check out some of the merchandise we have available. This includes t-shirts, mugs, phone cases, sweatshirts, stickers, and a whole bunch more. So go ahead and check out teespring.com/stores/trekuntold. You can also support our show by visiting patreon.com/trekuntold. If you become a paid subscriber to Trek Untold, you'll get first access to the show and a chance to ask our guests questions on future episodes. But most of all, please subscribe to the show wherever you're listening to it or watching it. And if you've already done that, please also leave a review and a rating if you can. Leaving ratings and reviews helps increase the visibility of podcasts on platforms like iTunes and other places like it. It shows that you're listening and that you like it, and that other people who are interested in the same subject are going to probably like it too. It helps us grow, it helps us get better guests, and it helps us keep bringing this amazing Trek Untold show to you. If you're already following us or have supported us in any other way, thank you, of course, for being a part of the Trek Untold family. There's a lot of Star Trek podcasts out there, and we're very grateful that you chose us to listen to. I'd also like to make a quick shout out to our friends at Triple Fiction Productions, who make some great 3D printed Star Trek inspired toys and replicas for fans of all ages and toys of all sizes. But you'll hear more about them a little later on in the show. Now, without further ado, let's beam up this week's guest. Computer, access interview file. And welcome back to the Trek Untold podcast, and now joining us on the other side of the screen, we have a face who I guarantee you've seen in a lot of Deep Space Nine, especially, but plenty of other Star Trek shows as well. Today, we are joined by Robin Morselli, and you have seen her as a background character in many episodes, over 100 in fact, and we're going to talk about a few of those today. Robin, how's it going today?
It's good. I'm really good and staying cool in California. I live in Westlake Village, California, and you're in New York. correct?
Yeah, I'm in New York and we're doing this interview right now and there's like a terrible heat wave, so I'm just gonna be like getting my air conditioner blasting while we do this and hope that I
Mine
don't melt.
too, so I hope you don't you don't hear it. But yeah, no, I'm really happy to be talking to you, and it's a lot of fun to have all these memories and go back because it was a really important part of my life.
Yeah, this is pretty fun for me as well because, as we do this show here, it's not just about the main actors, not just about the principal cast. We really like to dig into the character actors, the other folks, and especially people like you, the stand-ins, the background extras. There's a lot of interesting stories that you guys know that we've never heard. I'm very, very excited to really dig deep into what you remember, talk about what we left behind, if you will, and just talk all about all sorts of great Star Trek memories. But
Yeah, some I can tell you and some I won't, but most of them I can tell you.
well, Robin, before we start digging deep into the past here, I want to ask you, what is your earliest memory of Star Trek? And not being on the show, but just earliest memory of Star Trek in general.
Well, that would have been when I was a child. I didn't really watch it all the time, but I knew what it was. It was the original Star Trek with Shatner, and um, I just now when I look back at it, and after we did shows like Trials and Tribulations, I've gone back to watch some of those shows, and they mean more now than they did when I was watching them as a kid. I didn't know a lot about all the intricacies of Star Trek when I started the show. And when I got hired on the show, it was kind of like, oh, I'm on Star Trek, but I don't really know what I'm going to be. I don't understand it really. And then it took going, to the first day and figuring out what this was going to be like. And I had no idea it was going to last for 8 or 9 years, actually, because I worked on some of the last shows after DS9 stopped filming.
So, Robin, can you tell us where you were born, who your parents were, and what little Robin wanted to be when she grew up?
Okay. I was born in Pasadena. My mom was well, let's start out with my mom. My mom was a kid in Iowa who the mother lost, there were four boys and 4 boys and 1 girl. She was the girl. And she lost them to the Catholic services, and they were all farmed out all over the place to different homes. And so that's kind of like, she went to 9 foster homes when she was little. And then when she was 18, she went to Chicago, and she wanted to be a dancer. And she joined Arthur Murray's studio and was teaching dancing. And right before I was born, she was ready to go to New York for her audition to be a Rockette. But she ended up being pregnant, and that was a kind of squashed for her, especially at that time in the 50s. It was 1955, 54 when she got pregnant. And then my father, he was her student at Arthur Murray Studios, and they fell in love, and so then got together. And then he was from Philadelphia, Italian. She was Danish, Irish. Her parents were from Ireland and Denmark. And that's where and so what happened was they came to California and across the United States from Chicago. And they lived on Franklin Boulevard in Hollywood, and for 3 years. And then my sister was born. And then my dad, who I ended up having a very good relationship with later in life, but he put us on a train back to Iowa, and he just didn't pick us up. So my mom was a single mom for a while. And then I had a stepfather that was in the Army. She married a guy that was in the Army, and then we traveled all over the United States. Texas, we were in El Paso, at Fort Worth, and went to St. Louis and Chicago, and ended up in Chicago, where I went to high school in Lake Zurich, which is in northern Illinois, and graduated from Lake Zurich High School. And then after that, I went from Lake Zurich High School to Western Illinois University, where I graduated in 3.5 years, because I had to kind of get through. I was working at a hamburger place and going to school full time. And I graduated in 3.5 years with a pre-law and sociology degree. I spent probably 6 months working in the projects in Chicago, Cabrini Green, which has now been destroyed, and it's no longer there. But it was a very hard job working with kids and families then.
So at any point was acting a part of your plan, or was this something else you wanted to do with your life? I mean, you said you wanted to do something lighter, but before this point, I mean, was acting in your lens of view?
Yes, I mean, first of all, I loved movies. I was a movie, even as a child, a movie buff. I loved the old movies with Audrey Hepburn and with Katharine Hepburn and just Cary Grant. Loved all the old movies and watched them as much as I could as whenever they were on TV, because things, we only had like 5 channels at that time. And dating myself back, at the beginning, it was black and white. So with the bunny ears on the top, where we put foil to try to get the reception. But I did a couple plays in middle school, and I did some theater in high school, a little bit. But when I went to college, I loved the theater also. My mom, because of what happened with her and being a single mom and everything, she wanted me to be a lawyer. So I initially was going to be doing that, and that's why I went to pre-law school instead of doing theater in college, which was really what I wanted to do, but she didn't feel like it was a viable situation. And so I wanted to make her happy and not worry about me. So I did the law instead and didn't do theater in college. And then when I got out of college, then I ended up going to do a whole bunch of other jobs.
And so after college, like you mentioned, you did that. You wanted to get something lighter as well in your field of work, and that was basically away from law, away from the stuff that you were working on already. And that leads to kind of an interesting and unique job that you had. I'll let you tell us what that was, but I was very surprised to hear about this one.
Well, first of all, I had some loans to pay off. I was paying for college by myself. And so I went up I was in northern Illinois, and Lake Geneva was not too far away. So I drove there, and they had a big audition for bunnies to work in the clubs, and it was a ski area also. So I went there, did the audition, and I guess they liked me. I looked like what they, thought I should look like. And I worked there for probably almost a year and a half or 2 years.
So Robin Morselli was a Playboy bunny.
Yes, making a lot of money to pay off my bills. I mean, it's basically waiting tables in 3-inch heels and carrying 40 cocktails on a tray.
I don't think I could do that.
And I work in the Bunny Hutch, which was the dance club, there too. And then the restaurant, and then also the ski area. They had cocktails and things like that up there. And actually, a really funny part is I met James Darren there when he was playing the club.
Yeah, James Darren, who of course went on to be Vic Fontaine.
Yes, and which I brought up to him when he was working on the show, and we both were laughing because we were both, he remembered. He didn't remember me necessarily, but he remembered, working there. I think he worked there a couple times, at least when I was there. So that was funny, and that's what I did. And then. Do you want to know what I did after that?
So yeah, let's get the whole journey here and how you eventually got into acting. I want to see where this goes.
Okay. So after that, my father was in California. We had visited him some when we were kids on the plane. My mom put us on the plane when we were little tiny kids on Continental Airlines with a little badge on that says we were alone. I may have been 6 and my sister was 4. And we'd go on the planes by ourselves to California just go see my dad. And my dad was like Disneyland dad. We'd get off the plane and he'd have his red Cadillac with the big wings on the back. And we just thought it was like the coolest thing. We'd jump in the convertible, no seatbelts, nothing. And he was just like, he was a character. He was a big character. He was the maitre d' at the Bistro in Beverly Hills. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. But it was an old restaurant on Cannon Drive that initially hosted a lot of the Oscar parties and things like that. And a lot of the who's who in old Hollywood, where I worked for a little bit later in the coat room. And I made a lot of money doing the coat room, which is nowadays, it was a room filled with about 200 fur coats, which would not go over well today, but I'd be sitting in there with these furs and helping, in the coat room, and then have a lot of stories from there too, but we can go into that another time.
That's a different podcast altogether, I think.
Yeah, it really is.
And so from there also you were a flight attendant, right?
Well, that's where my dad was in California, and he knew Robert Six from Continental Airlines. He was the head cheese at Continental Airlines, and he talked to him, and Robert Six let me come out to California to have an interview to be a flight attendant, and I passed that, and I went through training. I was in flight attendant training in Marina Del Rey, and then got hired. I was hired, and then went to Texas and started my flight attendant career, which was about 5 years. I flew for the airlines and just traveled and flew, and I lived in Texas for a little bit, but I came back to California and I commuted back to Texas to work because I was on call, or most of the time. I wasn't the senior flight attendant, so I had to take the trips as they came. I didn't really have a schedule. And then I moved back to California and then lived in Manhattan Beach with another flight attendant friend of mine who's still a friend. Did that for 5 years. And when the airlines Frank Lorenzo was a person that bought the airline and then changed the airline completely as far as the way that it was run. And we were kind of laid off and stuff like that. So I didn't go back after that. I went back one time and then I decided I didn't want to fly anymore because it had changed so much from when I first started. But it was a great opportunity and a great job that I had a lot of fun at.
So you're a pre-law student, you're a Playboy bunny, you're a flight attendant. Where does Hollywood start to fit into this picture?
Okay, so after that, let's see. When I was laid off, I was a bartender. And I didn't know how to bartend, but there was a little restaurant on Ventura Boulevard called La Frite. And I had two other friends that were working there, and they said they needed a bartender. And I said, well, I'm the kind of person that says, well, I can do that. And I have no idea, because I drank maybe a cocktail now and then and a little bit of wine, but I wasn't a big drinker. So I bought a bar book and took the job, and actually bartended there for almost 2 years. Then after that, I went to, I was living in Redondo Beach then with a boyfriend, and we broke up, and I decided I was going to go and help my mom with her businesses in Seattle. So she lived in Idaho, moving to Seattle, and was opening a business in downtown Seattle, a clothing store. So she wanted me to be her buyer, and I decided that I would make a change because everything had kind of changed for me, and went there to be a buyer. And my mother had a lot of health problems. So eventually, in about a year and a half or 2 years after that, we lost the business because she wasn't well, and bought a house in West Seattle for her to live in because she wanted to stay in Seattle. And then I decided that I was going to come back to California and pursue or try to get my SAG card and try to do my acting. But I had also taken, along the way, I had taken some acting classes when I was in California. I took from Tracy Roberts acting school, David LeGrand, who I went to, actually, Lynn Whitfield. Are you familiar with her? She's a wonderful actress. She was in my class. John Corbett was in my Tracy Roberts class, and did a scene with him. I also was with Ed Hooks, who was a commercial teacher during that time also. So I was trying to train along the way when I was working in the bartending and stuff like that. So I had some experience with that. So when I came back, I decided that I was just gonna sign up with Central Casting, get myself out there and see what I could do on my own. So I signed up and I worked on several shows, one of which was In the Line of Fire. It was a movie with Clint Eastwood and directed by Wolfgang Peterson, and ended up being one of the people that was featured in that movie. Spent a lot, like 4 days with Fred Thompson, who was at that time an actor working on that show, and he wasn't a politician yet, but he and I talked politics the whole time. He was a Republican, I was a Democrat. And we had great conversations for 4 days because we had a scene on the stage. Did you ever see that movie?
I'm familiar with it, but I haven't actually seen it.
It's John Malkovich, and he's kind of a crazy guy, and it was a whole scene that was on the stage when he came in to mess everybody up. And but it was a wonderful time, and I got to talk with Clint Eastwood a lot. You know, he was very friendly to all of the background and to people that were working on the show, as was Wolfgang Peterson. So that was a really great experience. During that show, it was weird because I lived in with a friend of mine in Hancock Park, and I had gone home one night. It was very late because usually when you're background, you can have longest days. You go in the morning, and you may not get home till midnight sometimes. And I parked my car, and I got mugged. They tried to hijack my car, and so what happened was I ended up going through that, and the guy who had the gun at my stomach put it down a little bit as he opened my trunk to get stuff out, and I shoved him down on the ground and started running and ran and saved myself. And then I had to show up on the set the next day and told Clint Eastwood this story. And he was very sweet, but I was a little bit traumatized that I was not going to not go to work, because I thought the show must go on. And yeah, that's a kind of a crazy story that happened with that. And then I worked on a couple other things. One movie with Robert Blake really early on. I worked on 90210. My husband was a camera guy on there, so I worked on that show after I got married a little bit. So there's some other shows that I worked on, but mainly after I got my job on Star Trek, it was a full-time job.
I mean, I definitely want to dive into the Star Trek stuff, but like I mentioned before, there's not much out there about Robin Morselli. So, and your IMDb page is practically non-existent. Basically lists like a little bit of Star Trek, but not even all of your Star Trek. So, I'd love if you could help fill in the blanks.
I don't know if they give you much credit when you're, background and stuff like that. I mean, it's kind of just falls into a category that's non-existent, which is kind of the way it is. Even if you're on a show for 7 years, it doesn't really count, I guess. But for me, and I didn't put it on my IMDb because I just didn't. I don't even know how to do that.
I'll help you with that off this interview.
Okay.
Yes, I mean, so in addition to those, I mean, I'd love to kind of fill in the blanks for our audience out there who's listening and now just meeting you for the first time. I mean, where else can we see your face pop up?
Oh gosh, let me think. See, now I was on the Star Trek. I was thinking about Star Trek, and now I have to think about that because I know there were several things that. Oh, I was on Seinfeld. I worked on the JFK episode on Seinfeld.
That is a good episode.
Yeah, a couple other shows, and I'm trying to remember all of them, but I can't remember all of them. It was it's kind of a blur before.
Well, for folks who don't know really how that kind of stuff works also, I mean, you're trying to get your SAG-AFTRA card too, so what do you have to do as a stand-in or background extra to actually qualify for benefits, qualify for your card? How does that work? Well,
what happened with me is when I came back to LA and joined Central Casting, they'd send me out on a lot of different things, and if you're getting your background card if you're getting your SAG card as an extra, they actually have to give you a voucher that is a SAG voucher. And that is tricky because they're really stingy with them. But if they know, for me, I couldn't work every day on that show and not be SAG because of what I was doing. And also they want, when they have stand-ins, they have a certain amount of stand-ins they can have that they have to be SAG. And then the rest are non-union. Well, because it's such a big show, I was able to qualify for my SAG card pretty fast. Now, I don't know how it goes these days, but if you're working on a show and you show responsibility, and they can trust you, and you're showing up, and you're on time, and you have work ethic, and all that kind of stuff. I think that, you just have to go for it, and you can't give up. You just have to try it every way, and not in a bad way, but just show them who you are, and that they trust you to be on their sets, that you have work ethic, and you're a good person, basically. You kind of make a relationship, and they will, a lot of times they'll help you. But like I said, I don't know how it's going right now these days. But the SAG card for me wasn't very hard to get.
Trek Untold will return momentarily. Trek Untold is brought to you by Triple Fiction Productions. If you're a Star Trek cosplayer looking for props, or toy collector looking to spice up your shelves, Triple Fiction Productions has you covered. Triple Fiction Productions produces affordable and unique 3D printed Trek-inspired products from the original series, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, and the movies. You can expect the same amount of care and attention to detail in any of the items in their catalog, whether it's a prop replica for use in a fan film, or part of a cosplay, or accessories and playsets for figures from Playmates, Migos, or Diamond Select. Own your very own tricorder or phaser rifle with working lights, the bridge of the Enterprise E for your Playmates figures, or any other item from countless species and ships from the Star Trek universe. All products are 3D printed in the USA and are constantly evolving and improving based on fan feedback. To learn more about their products, visit them at triple-fictionproductions.net or on Facebook at facebook.com/triplefictionproductions. Triple Fiction Productions, taking Star Trek where no 3D printer has gone before.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Frakes. If you're of a certain age, you may remember me as Commander Riker from Star Trek The Next Generation. And my wonderful brother Daniel died with pancreatic cancer 24 years ago. They opened him up, they diagnosed, they said, "You've got 6 months to live." And that was it. He died 4 months later. And at that time, there was a 3% survival rate. Since then, we've grown to the embarrassingly high number of 10%. But a dear friend of mine, and probably all of yours, Kitty Swink, is one of those 10%. She has survived pancreatic cancer for 17 going on 18 years. Pancreatic cancer is the third leading cause of cancer-related deaths in the United States, with a 5-year survival rate. That's just 10%. And more than 60,000 Americans are estimated to be diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in 2021. More than 48,000 will die from the disease. Because symptoms are often vague and can be hard to detect. That's why I'm supporting the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network, the leading patient advocacy organization committed to fighting the world's toughest cancer. PanCan is working hard to create outcomes for this devastating disease through its groundbreaking research in early detection and better treatment options. PanCan drives progress by funding life-saving research, providing personalized patient services, and creating a community of supporters and volunteers like you who will stop at nothing to create a world in which all pancreatic cancer patients will thrive. You can help support our important mission by donating today at pancan.org. Thanks for your time.
We now return to Trek Untold.
So, Robin, let's go ahead and jump on into our Star Trek discussion, because we had a lot of episodes to go through. I don't know how we're going to get through 120, but we'll talk about some highlights of your time on Trek. But let's just first dive into how you actually got the gig. And was that through Central Casting?
It was Central Casting, and it was a huge cattle call thing. It was actually an audition. They just got me the audition. And we all showed up. There were, I don't know how many people there were. There were just lines of people showing up, and I really didn't know what it was for. I knew it was for Star Trek, but I didn't know what it was for exactly. And what they were doing was they were auditioning people for not only, I guess, the way they looked for certain things. And in my case, they hired me as an ops military Bajoran. And if you saw the initial casting of the Bajoran women, they were all kind of high cheekbone. You could slick their hair back. It was you could braid and do all kinds of stuff with their hair, and it was a certain look in the beginning, I think, that you can see if you look back at some of the episodes. And that's what they hired me for. And then in contrast, if you're a Bajoran and Ops, you can be a civilian also on the promenade. So I had I had a military outfit. So every time they had an Ops scene, I would work in the Ops scene somewhere. And then in the promenade, I was there too. But a lot of times when you're a stand-in or a person on the show, they don't want to see you all the time. They don't want to see your face all the time. So a lot of times we're in the background, like back, because we're there all the time. And they use you like, different things all day long. Maybe the back, walking away, with your back and stuff like that, so they don't recognize you all the time.
Now, was your first DS9 episode the pilot of the series?
Actually, yes. I'm trying to think of it. I think I was hired, and I don't know if I don't think I worked the pilot, but I worked everything after that.
Yeah, because you were there basically for the entire 7 seasons of Deep Space Nine, right? And you were basically playing the same Bajoran security officer.
Yes. But I also did many other aliens also. Michael Westmore, he and I got along really well because I would never complain with my makeup, and I took really good care of my makeup all day long. So they wouldn't have to, I wasn't a high maintenance person with makeup on. And also I was really open-minded and I loved it. The only thing I asked him is that he wouldn't put me in a full head that went over my face like this, but he did a lot of makeups that had pieces. But I was a Romulan. I did Klingon a lot. I was a Klingon. A couple other aliens that don't have names with they piece different things together and create things on me too. And it was a lot of fun. And it actually allowed me to spend a lot of time with the incredible makeup artists that were on that show. And I was able to get my makeup done in Michael Westmore's, like, his office, his place where he had all the masks and just all the history. And you'd be sitting there in the morning and you'd be looking at all this stuff going, oh, every time, and I never got tired of it. It's like, I can't believe this. This is just incredible. You'd see all these different masks from different characters that you've seen all through the years on the wall as you were getting your makeup done.
I'm curious, the Bajoran makeup, that's fairly simple, but things like Klingons, like other species that have more stuff on them, is your makeup as an extra the same as what a principal cast member who'd be seen in, with close-ups? Is your makeup basically identical to what they would have, or do you have something different?
No, I mean, pretty much the same. We would show up, well, when I was a Bajoran, even Bajoran though, it's a beauty makeup. So they do the nose, and they got it down faster as we went along. But to start out, it was like a 2.5. I'd show up at work probably 5 o'clock, and show up on set at 7 for the most part. That's after they got it down, because between the makeup and going to get your wardrobe on, it took that long. And then you try to get a little breakfast before you got on the set. And then it was a long, your day would begin. And Klingon, I would be there 2:33 in the morning, and it would take till 7 to get me ready between the costuming, the hair, the Klingon makeup. And yeah, when they put all the pieces on, they put the pieces on, but then they have to paint everything and make you, like a beauty. Klingons weren't necessarily beautiful, but they really had to, they do your eyes, they do everything had to be done on top of the prosthetics.
And I've heard horror stories about when you're doing an alien character, how sometimes you have to wear contact lenses, and those contacts can be terrible. Did you ever have to deal with any contact lenses?
I never did have to do that, thankfully.
You were one of the lucky ones.
But I would have. I would have done it. I just found it so fun, it was like you were playing. I mean, it was hard work too, and long hours, but I never got sick of doing it. And I loved it. I loved it. It was really fun. And we had a lot of fun on the set. I mean, a lot of the background was the same. A lot of the same people were in the background at the end that began the show. And that was really cool. And the stand-ins, a few of them changed. Nana had a few I was stood in for her when her stand-ins were leaving. She went through a few because they were trying to get somebody to look exactly. They wanted replicas so that if they turned them around, they could dress them if they needed to fill in something, you know. And I wasn't necessarily the same size as Nana, but I stood in for her a lot because we were kind of the same height. And for just a stand-in, I could stand in for her. And I did in several episodes. The one that stands out to me that I loved doing was the mirror episode with her. That was awesome. And just being close to her and watching her work was inspiring. She is amazing. And she's so incredible to work with, and her character and getting into character, and she's professional and she's nice, and I can't say enough good things about Nana.
I mean, as an extra, are you able to really kind of build relationships with the principal cast at all, or is it kind of like you're off to the side doing your own thing?
Well, if you're a regular extra on a show and you don't have the kind of job we did, probably it's hard to say. Sometimes you can connect with people, or they're just really nice and they want to talk to people. And sometimes they don't want to talk to, you know, the background. It's like, that's the background and this is the real people. It's not always great being background on a set, you know. Some sets have like a different food table with different kinds of food. You know, they just don't treat their background very well. And I was an advocate for all those years because we had some huge background calls. And after I was working quite a while, I made sure that, you know, that there was plenty of water for people. And we had a great catering guy, you know, Terry Ahern on the set, and he was amazing. And there was a lot of respect. And if there was ever a problem, you know, I would speak up for them. And there were very few problems though. You know, it was like everybody wanted to work on our show for the most part. You may find somebody that maybe didn't, but for the most part, everybody I talked to, they wanted to be cast on that show as many times as they could, in an episode.
Well, within that group of people, I mean, was there camaraderie between the other background characters, or again, was it just like a job so you get people swapping in and out?
No, it really was. I mean, everybody was just like, it was like when we saw each other, it was like old home week every time, and everybody was so happy to be there because the money was good too. You knew you were going to usually have a really long day. And you get extra bumps, extra money when you do your makeup and stuff like that. And a lot of times, you know, the crew knew most of the background. They knew the camera guys and they knew, you know, everybody. So it was very, very different than I think a lot of shows are. And we spent so much time there together because the days were so long. And you could have, you know, anywhere from a 12 to 18-hour day. And if you were a Klingon or something, and I think the longest day I had was maybe 19 or 20-hour days or something, a couple of them. I love my paycheck, but boy, that's a long time, you know. And then in your car, then going home in your car. So it's like, you know, it's like a 24-hour day to go to work. But I was younger then too, and it was doable.
So as we mentioned, you got this gig through Central Casting, but you were in I think you said about 120 episodes of Deep Space Nine.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that actually work though? Because essentially you're a regular background extra. So like, do they call you in constantly? Are you part of some kind of like special group, or is just Central Casting to say you're over there and you do it again today?
Well, usually, you know, if I wasn't background, I was standing in for somebody. I was a utility stand-in. I started out standing in for Nana quite a bit because her initial stand-in was leaving, and so I'd stand in for her. And then when they changed directors of photography from Marvin Rush to Jonathan West, they decided that maybe they wanted somebody that looked exactly like Nana. So in fact, there was one time during that time when someone tried to end my job, and it didn't happen because too many people wanted me to stay. And I'd already worked there a couple of years, and they knew my work ethic, and they knew I cared. And beside that, that job was paying for taking care of my mom up in Seattle and me down here. So it was literally very important to me, not only for the job, but for my survival. And so I fought for it, and somebody fought for me, and a couple of the actors spoke up, and I was able to stay. And that's when I became more of a utility stand, and I stood in for a lot of the background women. Louise Fletcher, all the time. She was phenomenal. I just loved her. We had a great relationship. She was funny, and I just had a ball with her. I stood in for Majel, and that was always fun. She was a hoot, and the costumes that these ladies were wearing, I mean, it was just so fun, you know, to be on set with them and get to know them a little bit. And they were so respectful and good with me too. And I took care of them. You know, if there was a change, if I was standing in a light and they weren't on set and they changed something, when they came on set, I would tell them exactly what they needed to do. So they would do it right the first time, you know, and they knew where the light was, or they knew where the change was, or where the tape was moved, or whatever like that. So I loved doing that, you know, because I was helping them too. And it was fun for me because I was able to have one-on-one time on the set. It was personal and fulfilling for me as much as that could be. The other thing I loved doing was I loved doing lines we were there so many hours. A lot of the actors had to wear these makeups for hours and hours and hours. And in order to get them out so they can get them back in the morning, they have a certain amount of hours that they have to be off. So maybe if they were doing a scene with someone else and they had been in really early, they had to get that actor out, and they couldn't do the off-camera lines with the actor. So I was able to do that. And I remember one time when I was doing off-camera lines with Rene Aubergenois, and he was there, and the person that was doing the lines with him had to go, and they had to get their makeup off and get home. And he just said, "Give it to me like she did. Like, I want to hear something. A lot of times they don't. They want to hear this monotone. They don't want to hear anything that's going to be distracting from somebody else." But he let me, you know, actually do it, you know, be the actor on the other side of the camera. And that was wonderful. And he thanked me and said, you know, it helped him a lot in that particular scene. And so we got to do that a lot too. And that made it more interesting and fun also.
And on that topic too, you mentioned to me off camera before we started this interview that you also did some stand-in work for a lot of the male actors, right?
Mm-hmm. Jeffrey Combs, I stood in for him when he was playing Brunt and Wayoon. And also when he, with the blue.
So that was Shran from Enterprise, and you were doing some stand-in work for him on Enterprise too.
Right. And my son, at that time when it was Enterprise, I'd already had my son. My son would come to the set, and I have pictures of him sitting on his lap with the blue makeup on, and he was so nice. And I just saw him at Aaron Eisenberg's memorial back recently, and he's just a wonderful guy and also so talented. It was really fun to watch him work these different characters. I loved it. And every so often I'd stand in for Ferengi, if it was a Ferengi episode. Because of my height, I was kind of like just that 5'7" height for some of them. If I was a little taller, I'd scrouch down a little bit, you know, to get down there. But I also stood in for Salome Jens, and she was another incredible, wonderful lady. I don't mean to like sugarcoat this, but you know, it's like these actors were on our show that we had on our show were just phenomenal. Every one of them. The regular actors, I can't think of. I mean, they had, you know, everybody has their days, but I can't think of one that I didn't get along with or enjoy working with.
Now, we talked about how you were running lines earlier with Renee, but typically for the stand-ins and for the background characters, you don't get to say dialogue. And I think part of that has to do also with your contract and I guess union rules. But were there any episodes where you did get to say any lines, or did you want to say lines? Did you want to have a bigger role in the show, or were you content just doing what you were doing?
Towards the last couple years of our show, because we've been on the show for so long, they would try to, they asked us, if what we were interested in, if there was something else that we would like to do too. And a lot of the stand-ins had lines. They had Randy Flug had a couple lines. He was Colomini's stand-in. Kathy DeBono had some lines. She was a Dabo girl. She's still a good friend of mine. And she had a couple. I think they tried to give lines to people. They asked me, and I said what I wanted and what I asked for, if it was possible, was to do voiceover. I wanted to learn how to do voiceover because after I had my son, I thought that would be something really cool to be able to do, and it wouldn't be like 18 hours a day. So I was given the opportunity to do voiceover on the last season of DS9, of which I did all the shows the last season in the studio. And it was great. But when I initially went into to do the voiceovers, I was not welcomed very much by the person who was running it. So it was a hard job for me, but I proved myself, I feel like, and I made it through all the episodes, and it was something that I just loved to do also. It was great. And I felt so accomplished because it wasn't an easy gig to do. But it was easy to do the work, but there was politics stuff kind of going on in there. So I had to kind of maneuver around that a little bit, but it didn't do. I'm the only person who would say that, but I did my job and I loved it and I learned a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad to hear that you were so fulfilled by your experience on the show, and aside from giving you paychecks, it also, gave you something for yourself deep inside of you. And also just as great is the fact that you met your husband on Star Trek. So yeah. Star Trek gave you your husband. So please tell us about that story.
Yeah, well, I'm not a proponent of dating people on the set, really, or at work. I just don't really think that works a lot of times, and it's not very professional. But I had met him. He was a day player, he's a camera person, a camera assistant, and when he'd come on the show, he was just really nice. And I had a girlfriend in his life, and I had somebody, but we still, would talk, and he was very friendly. It wasn't really flirty; it was just friendly. And probably a couple years later, after that, we had a wrap party, and we just ended up talking and hanging out together, and then have been together ever since. And that was we dated for like 3 years first, and then got married in California here at the Bistro Garden in North Hollywood. And my dad threw the wedding because he was a maitre d' at the bistro. So he arranged our whole wedding at the Bistro Garden. And it was a lovely wedding, and a lot of people from Star Trek. There were a few people from Star Trek that came, some really important friends. But and then I was at that point, I was 42 years old, so I didn't know if I was going to have children. Wasn't sure about if that was going to work out. I got married in January, and I had my son in December. And so I was still working on Star Trek at that time. And they were wonderful. When I went to have my child, they had a big baby shower for me on the set. Terry Farrell gave me this beautiful stroller for my son, and everybody else, they gave me these beautiful gifts and beautiful cards and wonderful things. It just made me feel so great. And went and had my son, and then I came back. The first episode I came back to was the baseball episode. And I remember the first day leaving my son in daycare, and I was like kind of weepy during that episode, and everybody was so supportive and wonderful to me. And also because he was just a baby, I was still breastfeeding. Can you say that on your podcast?
I think you just did, so we can't change it now. It's too late. We've just said it.
So, but there was nowhere to really go when you were background. And so I went to, or Terry Farrell and Nana Visitor let me use their trailers for for
Wow.
doing that. And that was wonderful because at the time, that was many years ago. Now I'm sure that they're more advanced on those things. But during that time, you know, it was you had to be very creative to try to do that. And so they helped me do that. And I worked on the show. I worked until the very end of the series.
And we should add that you were pregnant and still filming, right? So, like, what did they do?
Yeah.
They had to change your outfit? Did they change your character at all?
No, I was a Bajoran civilian. I wasn't an ops at that point, but I was.
You were temporarily demoted.
Well, they made me some great maternity outfits, of which I wore, you know, during the filming.
Now, are there any shoot days that particularly stand out in your mind? Any like really, really great days? Any really, really rough, terrible, no good, awful days?
I remember one day when we were in the desert with the Jem'Hadar, and I remember being out there. And I was standing in because I'm not a Jem'Hadar person, and we were standing in for them, and it was literally it was hot like it is right now, and they had to keep them in vans because you know how the Jem'Hadar is like a big outfit and there's hardly any breathing room. Literally, it was so hot that if they put their arms down, water would drip out of their hand. Like they had to keep them dry, keep trying to keep them dry because water was just dripping out of these costumes. And I remember everybody had to sit in these air-conditioned vans to work. That was pretty amazing. I remember doing a scene or standing in for Nana in the Mirror episode, which was really interesting. The one episode where Terry kisses the other woman, I was in that. I stood in for her, and that was a very important episode for her. And I was able to be there as her stand-in, and I was moved by her whole performance in that, and she was very. I wanted to support her because it was a heavy episode. I just remember trying to just be, the one with Renee, doing lines with Renee. And I love the episodes with the Ferengis. When there was a Ferengi episode, everybody was happy. I mean, those guys are so funny off camera together. What a bunch of characters they are. That was always fun. I love working with Avery because he was so smart. I mean, whether he was directing or acting, he just was so thoughtful and such a good actor, such a wonderful actor. I was so impressed with the acting on the show. I mean, I can't think of one person who didn't bring it every time. And they took their job seriously, and they were it was like being on set with a master class of people. And that was really wonderful for me.
That's a great way to put it. It basically is a masterclass, and you're surrounded by that kind of talent. I mean, what an amazing cast.
You just soak it up because some of it brought you to tears. Some of us would be laughing about stuff, but they were so professional and never that, a lot of them had pretty heavy makeups on. I know that Renee got his down to where actually he could peel it off. His makeup artist created it so it could actually still look good and he could peel it off at the end of the day. I think Ira Bear says something about, where every time he'd take his mask off, he'd hand it to somebody, and Ira got one of those and he has it on his wall, I heard. When you're working in these makeups all day long, as hard as they do, it's very, very, very challenging, especially if there's like with Armin. But he never could hear anybody complaining about that. Michael Dorn would work on the show. He was funny. He was a crack up. When they direct, Jonathan Frakes would come over and direct, and it was so much fun. He just had people laughing, and he's so charming. The other night I saw Anson Williams at he's a friend, Don Most, who he used to do Happy Days with. They're friends still, and Don Most's wife is a friend of mine. And we saw them at a restaurant, and they were together. having dinner, and it was just like, Anson. It was good, so good to see him. I hadn't seen him since the show, and they still had dinner together, and it was so great. Don Most is like the nicest guy in the world. When they direct, it was different. Like Renee directed one, and different seeing. It's great seeing the acting part of it, and then when they would direct and their view and visions of the shows they were directing. One of the most important people to me that I met on the show is Steve Oster, who was a producer on the show. He's a wonderful man. He's good at what he does and very quiet, pretty quiet, but you want to do a good job for him because I respected him so much. And he was very nice to all of to me. For instance, he came to my wedding, and I still have a warm place in my heart for him. And I don't know if you've ever heard of Jerry Bono. He was one of the costumers. He was a character, real character on the set. And we had James Cromwell on the set. He and Jerry were so funny together. I just think of like little times like that where we could all experience the joy and different things, and even sarcasm and exhaustion, and it's like we got it. Everybody got it, Everybody knew kind of how everybody was feeling.
And I want to ask about, I think, what's probably a very special day for Deep Space Nine, and especially for the crew working on the show, and that would be the finale, which you are also a part of. And again, this kind of goes back to our story with James Darren. But, I'd love to hear about what you remember from those final days when you guys were on DS9, and especially the last scene that you did. I mean, what were those final days like?
It was it was happy. It was emotional. It was like, we couldn't believe it was ending. For me, towards the end, I was doing different things. Like the stand-ins answered the phones. We did some production stuff too. I would take some of the Make-A-Wish kids around to meet the actors, and the actors were always so wonderful to these kids, and we'd all literally be in tears because it was so cool to see these kids light up when they come on the set. But so that day, or those days of the last episode, everybody was there. I mean, the production people were in the chairs in the audience. James Darren was, singing. Aaron was there. I mean, everybody was there doing something, and some of the family members were there. I think of some of the production people, and it was just like a party in a sense. Everybody was included, no matter who it was in this last show, and it just felt sad, but it was happy too. I remember just talking to Jonathan, and I remember talking to all of our friends. I mean, we cried at the end because it was like, this is a long thing that just ended here, and I didn't know how important it was until after it ended, and then how many years it would go on and on and on. When we were filming that show, the show wasn't as popular as it is now. But I have friends that are showing their kids that show now because it's more current now than it was then about so many things, inclusion and diversity, and we had all these different characters and everybody was different, but everybody got along. And the guest actors that came on all the time, Mark Alimo and Casey Biggs and JG
Hertzler.
Yeah, I mean, they're all phenomenal people, and all our guest stars that came on they were happy to be there, most of them. The only time I can remember one guest star had a real, and I don't know who that person was. It wasn't anybody I knew, but they came on and they were a Klingon or a Kardashian, and they freaked out with the makeup, and they had to recast that part really quick because the person couldn't do it.
Well, that would have been a Cardassian, not a Kardashian, because Kardashians love makeup.
Kardashian. Yeah, you're right.
Now, you were also on TNG. You also did some Voyager. You also did some Enterprise.
I did a couple of little spots in those. One of the shows, I think it was the one where The Rock was on it.
I was going to ask you about that one. In fact, yeah, you beat me to the punch. I was going to actually ask you
Yeah,
about that episode. That was Tsunkatse, where
yeah,
Seven of Nine fights the Rock.
that was one of the first shows I did, and I was in the audience, and that was kind of a weird makeup. I don't know what they called the makeup that I had on in that one, but it was like a forehead with hair but I was in the audience, and I remember nobody really knew. I didn't watch the WW World Wrestling, stuff. So I didn't really know who he was at the time, and he wasn't a movie star. But I do remember that he was really nice, and he like talked to people and stuff like that. But I thought it was kind of a weird. I was trying to understand what the show was about, and then she came out and she was fighting him, But we were there all day long in this audience, and because they don't fill it all up with people, they move the same people around, kind of like this, so that it looks like a full audience. It's kind of and mix them up and stuff like that. So we were there all day long, and that was a really fun day to work that show.
I've heard from folks who worked on like the different treks that usually the different sets had a kind of different feeling, and I don't just mean like visually, how they looked, how they appeared, that kind of thing. I mean like the actual atmosphere of the set. Like I've heard people say Deep Space Nine was a more serious feeling set, whereas TNG was a lot more lighthearted. So having been on the 4 different trek shows from that time period, I mean, do you feel there was like a different sense among the cast members, among the set in general?
Well, I think our show was serious, but it dealt with a lot of serious material. But when you were in Quarks, it was a party. Like you're going to Quarks, you're going to be on the party today, And it was a much lighter episode. Depending if we were on some of the locations were interesting at the beach. A couple of times, a couple of things were at the beach that we went to. There's so many. I'm sure. It's hard to pinpoint all of them. I mean, I have to think about all that stuff and maybe get back to you on another time. On some of the more specific stuff.
Yeah, I can imagine there's a lot to think about because again, you were on like 120 episodes of all these different shows and beyond. So I mean, yeah, it's a lot to remember.
There is. It's like I could go on, but I just have to specifically think about the different shows. I still have all the scripts.
Wow.
Which I can look at some of them and remind myself which happened when. But I just remember loving our show so much that it stood out to me always as the best show, and I feel like we all thought it was, but people at that time weren't. Maybe it was before its time or something.
Yeah.
It's so funny now watching kids watch it. I mean, I have fathers and moms sitting down with their kids to watch DS9, friends of ours. And it's funny to me that right now it's more important than it was even then.
I definitely agree with that. We've talked about that with a lot of folks who did the show, and they say the same thing. They feel a lot of the same way about certain episodes and how they're still, like you said, just as relevant, if not more so today than they were back when they first aired. That's a pretty amazing thing. It's a pretty amazing compliment.
I think we really connected, though, to a lot of the people. Like, I still see a lot of the people from the show. I'm hoping to have lunch with Nana. We had a little, we were going to have lunch, and then the COVID happened. So I hope that happens because I'd love to see her. I haven't seen her since Aaron's memorial. Camille Cave, who is a makeup artist, Nana's makeup artist, is phenomenal. She has a very successful business now with silicone. It's called silicon or something like that. It's with pieces for your skin to keep your skin, nice. And she's doing very, very well. And I see her, she has twins, and she married a camera guy from the set. It's a small world, kind of, because people keep coming around. Like, I've actually seen Mark Alimo out, because he lives around where I live, in the neighborhood.
Just imagining Gul Dukat walking around the neighborhood.
Seen him a couple times, yeah. Jonathan Frakes doesn't live far from here. I saw him when he first moved into this area. He was at lunch with his wife, I mean, it's just like normal people, out, and I don't see them all the time, but I still feel like we're all connected, because with the Star Trek thing it just makes the world smaller.
And you were telling me also some other stories that you had about just, I guess, more personal stories, and maybe we could talk about a few of those. One of them you mentioned was a memory you had of Levar Burton. Can you share that one with us?
Oh, yeah. Well, Levar to me is a prince. I mean, I love him. He's a wonderful man anyway, but when he was acting on his own show. And then when he came on our show, he was mostly directing. And then he directed some Enterprise shows also. But when my son was born, he was probably 2.5, my husband brought him to the set, and Levar was sitting there in his director's chair, and Levar put him on his lap, and my son loved Reading Rainbow. He didn't even know who Levar was on our set, but when he saw him, he's like, Reading Rainbow, Reading Rainbow. He put him on his lap and actually read him a book. And my son will never forget it to this day. And he was so sweet to him. And then when he was directing and it was time to roll, my son had been on the set enough to know that he needs to be quiet, when they say that we were getting ready to roll. But he let my son yell roll, rolling, and then he got to say action. And he'll never forget that either. And he was only like 3. So he was very kind and wonderful. They were all just good to him too. They treated us, everybody treated everybody like they were just another person, except for I have such respect for people. They don't have to be that way. And you work on a lot of shows where they aren't, but on this show, I have to say, I've met some stellar, incredible people that I will appreciate my whole life.
Now, we know with the Star Trek props department and the makeup department, they're usually pretty keen on not letting people take things home. So I'm curious if you got to, at any point, take any souvenirs home with you. Besides scripts, was there anything that you got to take with you that you're allowed to talk about?
I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about it.
I think the statute limitations might be okay for now.
I think somebody gave me a couple pieces of latinum.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. I have a couple of my Bajoran earrings that I wore.
Do you ever wear those out in public for fun?
No, but I have them like in a little case. I think I have a couple of my noses, that came off. But I didn't really, take a whole lot. Mostly, I do have scripts from all the shows and stuff like that, though. And call sheets and over here, I have call sheets, and there's one. I wanted to show you this. This was a last card that Renee gave everybody when the show ended, and it says thanks a wrap, and then it says none of us are as young as we were. So what friendship? So what friendship never ages. And then it says, Robin, I'm gonna miss you. And we miss him. He's a good guy.
Yeah, Renee is one of those folks that I'm so sad I never got to meet. But I've heard so many great things about him, and it's, that's gonna still bug me forever. I never got a chance to just tell him, how much I loved Odo and how much I loved his work in general. So, I'm happy to hear that he was such a great person. You have such great memories with him also.
He was very professional. He was an actor's actor for sure. But it was so funny because we were on a hiatus one year, and he was driving up the coast with his wife, and we were driving up randomly up the coast too to see my husband's family. And I saw him at a gas station. We both ran into each other's arms and went, "Hi!" At the gas station on the way up the coast. And he was so friendly, all off camera. It was different because he wasn't, in work mode. And he was a wonderful guy. I loved him.
Now, I want to jump away from Star Trek for a quick moment because there's actually another show that you did that is very obscure. I never heard of it until I actually did more research into you. And now I'm obsessed about this thing. You were in a show, or a pilot for a show called Star Patrol. And
Right.
That was directed by Jonathan Frakes. It was basically meant to be a pilot that was like a sci-fi parody show.
Mm-hmm.
I never heard anything about this until I looked up more about you, and now I need to know everything I possibly can about this show. So what can you tell us about Star Patrol, and what do you remember from being on it?
Well, I could, I didn't really know what it was. They just asked me to be on it, and they made me this incredible costume, and I had a really different makeup on, and it was just the same people. I just, was glad that they wanted me to go on it for a little while. I wasn't on it very, long. Ron Moore, wasn't he? He was involved in that show.
I think so. I'm still learning the stuff myself. I think he was.
Yeah. Ron Moore was another person. He wrote a lot of the episodes of Deep Space Nine. And then there was a movie that he did and everything. He was really, I didn't even know who he was, but he'd come down and talk to everybody all the time. And I don't know if he had anything to do with me going on to that show, because things can get really political, about who wants who, where, and everything like that. I just ended up there, and I don't know if he had anything to do with it or if it was the cast, other people, ADs or whatever. But I wasn't on the show very long because I decided that I needed to raise my son, and I didn't want him in daycare being raised by somebody else, especially since I'd waited so long, to have him. And so I wasn't on the show very long, but it's pretty simple.
Now, at what point did you actually walk away from Star Trek? I mean, like we said, you were on Enterprise, you did some Voyager. Was there a point where you just said, I've had enough, I want to raise my son now? Like, do you remember what that was, what that episode was, the last one that you did, perhaps?
It was probably after the last show ended on Enterprise. My husband was a camera assistant on an Enterprise with Marvin Rush. I used to go on there and work a little bit, and I stood in a few times too, and I did a couple alien things on there. I did one that Michael Westmore created, this crazy alien, for me. But the thing I remember too is that the Christmas parties that the captain from the Enterprise gave.
Scott Bakula.
Yes. I call him captain, but of the Enterprise.
We all do.
But, he used to throw a Christmas party every year for the families. It was like his gift to the crew. And you could you don't bring your kids usually just to the cast parties at all. I mean, or any kind of party. But he threw this big party for the whole family at Christmas time. And they had, face painters, and they had little candies stuff, and they had all of these stations for all these kids. And then it was the most wonderful party every year that he gave. He was so generous and such a nice guy. He was like, my husband even says he's one of the nicest people he ever worked with, and consistently. So that's just a side thing, a party. But it was nice that he included all the children and along with his own, and his wife was sweet, and it was just very generous, I thought. But and then my husband worked on a couple other shows with Marvin after that too. And he's doing a lot of things down in the South, I think now, movies or television shows, but he was very helpful. He was my first director of photography that I stood in for. So he kind of taught me how to be the ultimate stand-in, I said, because if you weren't there, you were gone. And so I never left the set, because he'd say, his words were, if I say second team, that's what they call the stand-in. If you don't come in there, and you aren't on your mark when he asks for you, he's not a happy camper. But he's a nice guy and very quiet, but he expects you to do your job. And so that's how I learned this, like old school, you don't call for stand-ins. You know when you're supposed to be there. And then when he says he wants you to move when he says moo. By the time he says moo, you better be moving, so I like that, because I think people these days, I've been on some sets where they call for stand-ins, call and nobody's there, and they're all on their phones, and it's just not as professional. And we had to be to keep our jobs, but you wanted to be, because you knew that this is a good job to have. If you weren't an actor, it was the best thing you can get next to it. So I respected him a lot for being tough on us.
So once your time on Star Trek had totally wrapped up, what was life for you after that point? I mean, were you retired from acting, or did you continue to do other things?
Well, I didn't really do a lot more of that. I do a little standing in here and there, not these days. What I did was I decided I was raising my kid, and by the time he was in school, he started in theater, like went in third grade. He did James and the Giant Peach, started with that. And then they were writing little plays for themselves. He was in a GATE program in the school where the kids write their play and they do it. And anyway, I got really, really involved in children's theater and the arts and music, and how important it is to have that for kids and for people, because I feel like it helps with kids be compassionate and care about things other than just themselves. You have to be a team when you're playing, music together and when you're doing a play together. And then he did baseball too. So when he had done theater all through grade school on his own. I mean, I didn't push him, but what I did was support them. Like I made props and did costumes and stuff like that. And then middle school, he started doing it. And then in high school, he was still doing it. And community theater at Thousand Oaks Civic, he did a couple shows. And I was always working behind the scenes, either raising money or doing something with costumes or something like that. And that's what I love to do. And that was all volunteering, but I was able to spend time I wasn't directly with him. I'm not one of those moms, like one of those crazy moms, but I like being involved with children's theater and supporting it and all that stuff. So that's what I did up until the time he went to college. And then when he went to school, my father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and my mother had just passed away too up north. I was taking care of her, and then my dad had Alzheimer's, so I was caring for him. And then he passed away about 4 or 5 years ago. And then I was diagnosed with Parkinson at that time. Actually, I was diagnosed before that.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that, in fact, because that's something you told me, and I was very, very interested in hearing about that.
Yeah, and it's not sad. I mean, it's a devastating disease for a lot of people, and I think it's an epidemic. I think there's more people that have it that don't. It just takes a long time and a lot of money or good insurance to get diagnosed. It took me 3 years to get diagnosed because I knew something was wrong for a while. And wrong being, just I knew something was going on it was stress, which I was being told it was. So when I finally got diagnosed, and I say finally because it gave me relief to know that I wasn't crazy, number one. And second of all, that, after I learned more about it, because I thought, okay, I have Parkinson's, how long am I going to live? Because my son was a freshman in high school. And I thought, I want to see him graduate. What am I going to do? And the doctor said, you're not going to die of that. You'll die of something else. And I went, oh, well, okay, that's good. So I just went on from there. And it's been now, honestly, probably 12 years that I've had it. And I'm doing really well. I don't have a lot of, I think you can tell I don't have a lot of symptoms. Most of my symptoms are internal. And I do a lot of fundraising, and I promote, Michael J. Fox Foundation and all Parkinson's affiliated foundations that are trying to find a cure for it, because there's no cure. But I deal with it on my own terms. I, have medications, but I also have a good eating habits and healthy lifestyle, and for the most part, and vitamin regimen and positivity, and trying to keep stress out of our lives with COVID and everything going on, fires and tigers and lions and tigers and bears. But I make the best of it, and I really think positivity will get me through to help get a cure for it. And I hope I'm around to see it. I want to be part of it. So that's good. And I just watched my son graduate from Boston University with a BFA in acting.
And congratulations to him for doing that as well.
Thank you. He worked really hard, and he's done a lot of work. So now he's going to be in this crazy business. So and it's up to him to keep going. I said, just don't give up. You love it. So.
And what's it like for you as a mom that you got now a son in acting? I mean, he's got basically, your husband is a camera operator, you're an actor, your son's an actor now. I mean, are you guys all up in there giving him advice, or are you letting him do his own thing?
No, you know what? He doesn't listen to me, really. I mean, advice, he has other people that he listens to more than I do. I just felt like I wanted to give him the tools and the opportunity to I didn't get to do that when I was younger, and I wanted to give him the opportunity to follow his passion. And if he liked it, I mean, it's not my idea. It was his, that's what he wanted to do. So I've supported him in it and helped him get the tools to be able to go out and work and try to find the work. But, it's his deal now, and I support him, all the way. And I hope, I just say, don't give up. If it's something you really, really, really love to do, keep trying, keep working at it. Don't give up. The people that make it don't give up. And so that's all I tell him. And then it's up to him.
Well, hopefully one day we'll see him on maybe Star Trek Discovery or Strange New Worlds or one of the other Trek shows, right?
Maybe, you never know. It's possible. I think when he was a little kid, he was intrigued because he got to come to the set quite a bit, and he got to see me as a Klingon. He didn't notice that I was even a Klingon. He knew I was Mama. Like it was perfectly normal, but I'm dressed like a Klingon. But he has always loved. He's very creative, and he's always loved the arts. And I'm a big proponent. I'm just a big proponent and fighter for the arts. Like, I think that during this COVID time, the arts and music have saved people, definitely. And I think that, aside from having this COVID stuff happening, people are going to have a long road back, mental health and caring for themselves and getting back to normal I think we have a ways to go. But I know for me, if I put on some music, or if I'm watching a great movie, or if I'm going to the theater, watching theater, and I miss theater so much. We used to go to New York every year, twice a year, and I would just binge theater, and I want to do that, at the end of this year, if it's possible. There's so many things I want to see. To Kill a Mockingbird, I saw Colin Meaney on Broadway with Denzel Washington, I mean, I saw Avery in it. One he was in a play here in California. I mean, yeah, I can't wait till that comes back. And I think it really has been the savior for a lot of people to get through.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically how my podcast kicked off too, was I finally had the time to actually work on it because of the pandemic. Basically, full time, what I do shut down essentially for quite some time. And so it gave me time to do this idea that I had for probably close to a year before I actually got down and did it. And thankfully, because of the pandemic, as horrible as it sounds, a lot of actors and people who worked in the industry were also sitting at home doing nothing. So it gave me a nice way to reach out, and they had the time, I had the time.
I think a lot of people found DS9 over this time too.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of folks discovered all Star Trek. I mean, I know a lot of folks who just literally came into it in the last 15 months. They just were like, I finally got time. I'm going to start at the beginning and I'm going to work my way to the end.
Right. And they seem to be all over it and love it. A lot of people. So that makes me really happy, that it'll live. That's what's fun, to be a part of something that's going to be around for a long time and live on. And you're proud of it. You're proud of the material. You're proud of, what you did in it. And even in my position, it gave me, it let me take care of my mom. I got to be around people that I just loved. Some of the ADs and some of the background and the stand-ins that we were there every day. I think that our lives have gone on, but we still will always have that in common. And I love that part of it.
And Star Trek definitely gave you a lot of gifts that you've used to this day, and that you have in your life to this day as well. And that's just great to hear that it was so important to you, because I know our fans love hearing that too. They love hearing that people who are part of that Star Trek universe love it just as much as they do. So that's just great.
Yeah, and I'm learning it more because of not being, knowing that much about it. I've learned more probably over the last 10 years than I did even when I was working on it, because you're in that whirlwind. and I could see parts of it, but now it comes together more now that everybody's a little older and we've lost a couple of our actors from that show. It's bittersweet, but it's still a wonderful thing to have been a part of.
So by the way, Robin, also, this is completely unrelated to Star Trek talk here, but you told me off camera you did something for the Billboard Awards, and you did it with a person we've never talked about on this show before. I don't know how we haven't, but you did something with Shaquille O'Neal. So
Right.
you got to tell me about that story. That just sounds too good to be true.
Well, one of the producers came to me and said, would you like to do a thing for the Billboard Awards? And I said, sure. What is it? Well, we're going to put Klingon makeup on you. You're going to be a Klingon, and you're going to go with this guy, like really buff Klingon guy. You're going to go down the red carpet, and you're going to do a little bit with Shaquille O'Neal. And I said, oh, okay, that sounds fun. So I went through all the makeup. They did a beautiful Klingon makeup on me. I mean, it was awesome. And we walked out. We did a lot of talking to different reporters and different things on the red carpet. Went in, there were a bunch of other characters from other shows, in there getting ready to go into the Billboard Awards. And what I had to do was I go into they said, you're going to walk in there and you're going to go to Shaquille O'Neal's seat. He's going to stand up. And of course he's like, huge. And I'm going to stand there and say, get out of that seat. It's mine. And he's going to cower and kind of walk away while you sit in the seat because, you're Klingon chick. So I said, okay, I'll do that. So I did it, and it was phenomenal. I mean, he stood up, and I just looked at him like that, and I go, get out, like that. And he stood up kind of like this, and he walks out, and I sat down on the seat, and that's really all it was, but it was a lot of fun. It was like a whole day and red carpet and fun as a Klingon. So that's it. It was fun. And I got to do it. I was happy they asked me, It was great.
So, Robin, before we wrap up here today, I just wanted to ask you, I guess, if you can give our audience a gift today, and that would be, let's say, some piece of advice, perhaps. What's something that you know today that you wish young Robin knew back when you were first starting out?
Anything's possible. Don't be afraid to go after what you love to do, and don't let anybody tell you that you can't do something. You can do it. You can. On some level, I mean, for me, I went into this and not knowing what was going to happen, but it came into something that it was around what I love to do, but it was in a different package, but it was still very valuable. And it was wonderful to be around. So I would say, and this is what I tell my son, don't be afraid. The only failure is not trying. If you try and you go for it, and you don't get it, try again, because something will happen. And have work ethic and put your phones down a little bit. I mean, if we would have been sat around, I don't know, I have a picture of me. We only had a phone on the wall when I worked on Deep Space Nine. And we'd have to answer the phones, and the phone stretched out, on the cord and everything. We had pagers to know if we were working or not. But you didn't have that stuff out. I mean, when you were working, you were working. And I think that there's something to be said for paying attention. I paid attention and I learned so much by being on the set and staying on the set and not just wasting that time, in that kind of way, and being professional. Just be professional. Be somebody that they want you to come back because you're easy to work with also. And you treat everybody with respect and care.
Robin, last thing for today, and this is going to be probably the big one now. What is the best thing about being a part of the Star Trek universe?
The best part, I think, is just everything I've told you. Being involved with still people from that time, watching their lives, unfold in different ways, having my family be a part of it. My son, being a part of it and having the memories that he does as a little kid. And it's all pretty positive. I had one thing that happened where, they tried to get rid of me. But again, like I said to your fans, I didn't give up. I fought for my job and I knew that I deserved to be there. And I got to stay because I didn't say, okay, I'll go away. I said, this is why you should keep me, because I'm good. I know what I'm doing. I know that you need me too. And I will do a good job for you, you know. And so I got to keep my job for 4 or 5 more years after that. But, you know, there's always going to be somebody who's going to try to tell you you can't do it. And then you've just got to say, yes, I can. I'm going to try, and I'm going to work really hard. And you're going to see that I can do it. Improve yourself, you know.
Great answer.
I think I got that from it. And a thick skin from the voiceovers, you know, for when somebody wants you gone and you don't give up again. After the last show on that, and I love doing those. I mean, I love learning how to do that in the studio. The last show, I mean, I kept everything in and I was professional. And I walked out to my car and put my hand on my steering wheel and just cried because I was so stressed out from, but I thought, and it wasn't that so much as I did it. I completed it. I finished it. You know, nobody could take that away from me. And it was really important to me to do that. So be strong, hang in there, you know, and keep doing what you love. And sometimes it'll go in a little different direction, but that's okay too. You know, it works its way through, and it'll work out. But if we survive this COVID crisis, we can do anything. I think any of us, you know, I just feel like we're here still. We're doing it, you know, and the possibilities are endless too.
So Robin, thank you so much today for chatting with us, telling us about all of your great memories from Star Trek. It really has given you so much. I mean, it's just, again, I said it earlier, it's just wonderful that Star Trek has given you just as much as Star Trek has given people like me. So, you know, it's been real wonderful to help kind of tell your story. And I feel like, you know, your face is one of those characters that I see all the time in Deep Space Nine. Like, for real, I know your face from Deep Space Nine. I know your Bajoran ridges and everything. And it's just really fun meeting you now and just hearing what a great experience you had. So thank you for sharing everything today with us.
Well, thank you so much. It was really fun to do this and also bring up a lot of memories for me that, you know, I hadn't thought of for a while, but it was a gift that keeps on giving. Deep Space Nine was phenomenal, and I'm happy to have been there.
And I just want to mention also, again, just throw back to your discussion about Parkinson's. If you don't mind, can you just name a few of the organizations that you advocate for so people can know where to donate and learn more about how they can help?
Well, the main one is Michael J. Fox Foundation, and they are working very hard to try to come up with a cure for Parkinson's. There's no cure yet. Everybody I talk to, there's somebody that knows somebody who has had Parkinson's, either their parent or their grandparent. And it's not always the old person's disease. It's a young person's too. Like I just heard the other day, somebody 29 had Parkinson's. And I think more people out there have it than not. And I don't know what's going on, but we'd like to find out what's going on and why and what's causing it and a cure. So if anybody wants to get involved with that, or if you have had family members that had Parkinson's, look up Michael J. Fox Foundation. And that would be awesome.
Well, Robin, thank you again so much. Really do appreciate your time. It's been real great hearing your side of things. It's a perspective we don't get to hear that much from.
It was a pleasure, and it was nice meeting you. And thank you so much for asking me.
All right, thank you, Robin. And of course, as always, live long and prosper.
Same to you. Thank you so much.
And that was our chat with Robin Morselli. Thanks so much for filling in the gaps about your life and time in Trek. And if Robin starts doing conventions, I urge you to say hi and meet her. You'll feel very welcome, and I'm sure she's got a lot more stories that we didn't even get to on this episode. And one more reminder, please check out the Michael J. Fox Foundation at michaeljfox.org to learn how you can take action and help put an end to Parkinson's disease. And by the way, in case you're wondering about that odd show we talked about, Star Patrol, here is just a little bit more about that show. The pilot was directed by Jonathan Frakes, as we mentioned, and filmed after Deep Space Nine had completely wrapped up filming. The main ship on the show was the Icarus, and Robin was part of the crew of the Icarus Rangers. But as for the actual ship design, well, you'd actually see that pop up a few different times in Star Trek Voyager, along with some of the other aliens, some of the props, makeup, sets, all sorts of things that ultimately got recycled and reused throughout Star Trek in other iterations. The star of, well, Star Patrol was Charles Rocket, who also did an appearance on an episode of Voyager, and the series would also have featured Sarah Ramirez as his second-in-command, along with appearances from Ed O'Neill and Jason Alexander in supporting roles, among many other cast members. The pilot was 22 minutes long, and suffice to say, it did not get picked up for renewal or to be made into a full series. One day we might just do a whole episode about this, so I will leave you with just that tiny taste of the show that never got off the ground, called Star Patrol. So that wraps up this week's episode of Trek Untold. Thank you so much for checking it out this week. Please make sure that you're following us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, all at Trek Untold. That's one word, no spaces, at Trek Untold. It's the best way to get updates on guests, check out all the memes and other things that we're posting, and interact with myself and other Star Trek fans. If you'd like to support this podcast, go ahead and check out patreon.com/TrekUntold and become a subscriber to the show. Or check out teespring.com/stores/TrekUntold to check out some of our merchandise. If you've been enjoying Trek Untold, please leave us a rating and review on iTunes or wherever you're listening to podcasts. And if you're on YouTube, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel, youtube.com/nerdnewstoday. Leaving ratings, reviews, and comments are things that all help this podcast grow, and they'll cost you nothing but a few seconds of your time. Doing things like that, or even telling your friends or other Star Trek fans about the stuff you've heard on the show and making sure they know about us, are huge helps to keeping Trek Untold growing. Thank you once again to our sponsor, Triple Fiction Productions. Go ahead and check them out at triple-fictionproductions.net. If you'd like to send us some feedback about this episode, suggest a guest, or ask to be booked on the show, go ahead and send me an email at trekuntold@gmail.com. And of course, thanks to listeners like you for choosing Trek Untold and making it your weekly Star Trek podcast. This has been Trek Untold. I'm Matthew Kaplowitz, and until next time, fortune favors the bold.
Trek Untold is sponsored by TrekSphere.com, promoting fan-produced Star Trek content in all forms, is powered by the Rageworks podcasting network, and is affiliated with Nerd News Today.